Good afternoon and welcome to the Virginia Board for People with Disabilities Training Alumni Continuing Education session entitled United Voices, Renewed Resolve, Virginia's DD partners pushing for the next step forward. On behalf of Virginia Board and the Alumni Development Program's training alumni, we wanted to not only welcome all of you who are in our Zoom classroom, but we want to also welcome all of our Facebook viewers and our YouTube viewers. We want to share with you that the mission of the Alumni Development Program's training alumni is to provide advocacy trainings and continuing education workshops focused on the broader disability community in the Commonwealth of Virginia. For us to deliver these public continuing education workshop sessions through our training alumni, it takes a village. And so we want to acknowledge our Executive Director, Terry Morgan, for her leadership, our administrative team member, Ms. Tara Bethea, our communications team member, the Communications and Information Manager, Anita Ayers, and our closed captioner from Virginia Relay. Working with us today is Ms. Karen Yates. We also acknowledge our partner, Boycott Visual Communications, Mr. Eli Red, as our tech-savvy technician and specialist. We are working closely always with DARS, who helps us with our procurement management. We welcome and thank our interpreters today, Ms. Carrie Humphrey and Ms. Angela Douglas, and we acknowledge our Director of Planning, Research, and Evaluation, Ms. Mia Harrison, and of course, our two coordinators in our Training and Alumni Development Programs Unit, Ms. Kelly Vanella and Ms. Christine Jeremiah. Thank you, production team members, for all that you do to make these sessions successful. We want to share with you that it is always our commitment to evaluate our sessions, and the sessions feedback are always anonymous and they are optional. There are two polls. Right in your view at the moment is our About You poll, and that is simply for us to understand who is here. And at the end of the presentation, there will be a session feedback poll, and we encourage you, please, if it is your prerogative, if it is your choice, to please take the poll for us. If you have a need for an alternative format, we ask that you would drop it in the chat box, and or you may email our Director of Planning, Research, and Evaluation, Nia Harrison, at vbpd.virginia.gov after the event. Our session will proceed as follows. There will be introductions of our presenters, and then we will turn it over to our three presenters. And then formally, we will entertain the question and answer session that will be facilitated by our program coordinator, Christine Jeremiah. And then we will come back and provide the poll and any closing comments that we may have. It is my honor to introduce to you three dynamic executive directors. Our first presenter introduction is our Executive Director for the Virginia Board for People with Disabilities, Terry Morgan. Terry began her directorship as the Executive Director in 2020. So since this is 2025, she is in her 5th+ year. Terry began her career in Michigan as a residential counselor and supervisor before moving to Richmond in the early 1990s, where she managed an array of residential and community-based services. She joined Virginia Board for People with Disabilities in 2001 as a program manager, leading statewide training initiatives and policy efforts in housing and transportation. She later spent 6 years with the Virginia Department of Medical Assistance Services, focusing on Medicaid waiver, operations, and policy. Terry holds a Bachelor of Science from Eastern Michigan University and a Master of Business Administration with a concentration in healthcare Management from Western Governors University. Our first presenter, Terry Morgan. Our second presenter is attorney Colleen Miller, who served as the executive director of Virginia's Protection and Advocacy System since 2003. When the P&A was a state agency, attorney Miller managed it through notable legal victories, including the U.S. Supreme Court decision, VOPA versus Stewart, that established the agency's right to sue to obtain specific confidential information from the state and abuse allegations. In 2012 and 2013, she led the agency's transition out of state government to private nonprofit status as the Disability Law Center of Virginia. A cum laude graduate of the University of Pittsburgh School of Law, she began her career as an honors program staff attorney in the Civil Rights Division of the United States Department of Justice and was previously the legal director of the New Mexico Protection and Advocacy System. Attorney Colleen Miller. Our third presenter, Dr. Parthy Denora, is the executive director of the Partnership for People with Disabilities, Virginia's University Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities. Dr. Denora oversees a portfolio of 40 projects and a $17 million budget in external funding. Over the past 25 years, she has led federal, state, and privately funded research, model demonstration, training, and technical assistance projects. Her work centers include disability and family-led research and practice, focusing on home and community-based services, interventions that promote independent living and self-determination, and support for families of people with disabilities. Her training in public policy and administration, experience working alongside people with disabilities, their families, and the professionals who support them, and her perspective as the parent of a son with autism are foundational to her leadership and research. It is my pleasure and honor to turn the rest of the session over to these distinguished executive directors, Terry Morgan, Colleen Miller, and Parthy Denora. Take it away, ladies.
Talk about the DDA
Terry,
program.
somehow I didn't hear you at the beginning. I'm not sure.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can.
Okay. We are thrilled to be here with you this afternoon. Thank you all for joining us. We're going to spend some time today talking about the DD Act and about DD Act programs. If we can go ahead and pull up the slides. Penny, do you have that? Or Eli?
Eli will pull them up. Eli, you have access to them? Terry, we thought you guys got it. Okay.
Great.
If you want to make me co-host, I'm happy to move through. Otherwise, I'll just tell you the next slide, please. All right.
We can give you co-host, Terry.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well, it's really great to be here with you today. We have had a lot of fun, but also, interesting look back at some of the history of the DD Act. So it's been really educational for us as well. So what we're going to do today.
Terry, you muted yourself. There we go.
Okay.
You cut off it, but what we're going to do today.
Yeah, I was trying to go to the next slide. Okay, the plan for today. We're going to do a discussion of the history of the Developmental Disabilities Act, which is a really important piece of federal legislation. And we're going to start with a little bit of history. We're not going to dig too deep into history, but we really think the history of the DD Act and the history in general of the disability rights movement is really important. So we're going to hit on some highlights throughout throughout our discussion. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about the 3 DDAC programs. The Virginia Board for People with Disabilities that serves as Virginia's DD Council, the Disability Law Center of Virginia that serves as the protection and advocacy system here in Virginia, and the Partnership for People with Disabilities at VCU, which is Virginia's University Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities. We want you to know us. We want you to know who we are and what we do, both individually as individual agencies, but also as the DDAC network here in Virginia. And then we're going to spend some time discussing what we can do together now and in the future as advocates, as professionals, as families, people with disabilities, and how we can support one another. I'm going to start with a little bit of the history, and if we could go to the next slide. So I'm going to take us back about 100 years. And this is important because it really is a part of Virginia's history, as well as national history and international history. And this is a Supreme Court case called Buck versus Bell, again, 1927. And Carrie Buck was a young woman who lived at what was called at that time the Virginia State Colony for Epileptics and Feeble-Minded. And what that is known as in more recent history is Central Virginia Training Center. So it was one of Virginia training centers. And back in 1927, the colony petitioned the court to sterilize Carrie Buck, who was an 18-year-old patient at the institution. And the institution maintained that she was a threat, a genetic threat to society. And this goes back into the dark history of eugenics. And if you've heard about the eugenics movement, this is a piece of that history that took place in Virginia. And this case went all the way up to the United States Supreme Court. And it really kind of showed the values and the perceptions of people with disabilities at that time. And what was said in the United States Supreme Court decision is that Carrie Buck is a feeble-minded white woman who was committed to the state colony above mentioned in due form. She is the daughter of a feeble-minded mother in the same institution and the mother of an illegitimate feeble-minded child. This was, again, in the decision of the United States Supreme Court. And in that decision, Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes went on to say that it's better for all the world if instead of waiting to execute degenerate offspring for crime or to let them starve for their imbecility, society can prevent those who are manifestly unfit from continuing their kind. 100 years ago, this is the values that were represented in society about people with disabilities at that time. Now, on the next slide, I'm going to jump ahead about 35 years. This was a time, if we could go to the next slide. It is very sad. I would try to advance the slides, but when I tried to do that last time, I muted myself. So I'm going to defer and just ask for help. So pre-DD Act era, the era of institutions, this was a time in the 60s when many people lived their lives in institutions, often because parents were told that your child will be better off in this institution where they'll receive training and education. It was kind of an out of sight, out of mind time. In 1967, there were 194,650 people living in these large, segregated, isolated institutions. And in these institutions, people often faced neglect and abuse. And parents did what they thought was best at the time, what they were told by professionals, and made decisions based on that information. That was considered best practice at the time. And it's really hard for us to think about that. But this is, back in the 60s, not really that long ago, and pre the DD Act. And as we move forward to the DD Act coming into its own, next slide, please.
And just while we're getting the next slide up, just to really emphasize that those institutions really came with the best of intentions.
Mm-hmm.
It was considered to be very benevolent in those days.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Colleen. And one thing I forgot to mention at the beginning is we want this to be a conversation. So you will see us jumping in with each other to add comment or thoughts or experiences that we've had. So that's something we're going to be doing throughout the presentation. So when we move to the 60s, we're really seeing a catalyst for change. This catalyst started really spearheaded by President Kennedy, who pulled together the President's Panel on Mental Retardation and produced a report that called for national reform. And if you have an idea about why this was important to President Kennedy, please feel free to put it in the chat. I'm going to talk about that a little bit in a second. But this really sparked congressional action to pass some first federal legislation to expand education, research, and community services. And one of the reasons this was so important to President Kennedy is that he was a sibling. He had a sister with an intellectual disability who he grew up with and later went into an institution. There's a long history about Rosemary Kennedy, and I'm not going to go into that history, but I think what's important is that this kind of shift in thinking was initiated and really led by a sibling of a person with a disability. And we all know that it's families, it's siblings, it's allies that really move things forward. So that family link is really important. So as we move on in the 60s, we have continued action on the next slide. Again, back one. Again, by a sibling, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Rosemary's brother, continued movement for federal reform. And that came about through an investigation of the conditions at Willowbrook State Hospital. There was a documentary called Willowbrook, The Last Great Disgrace that aired in 1972. And this documentary really shocked the nation and led to significant public outcry and calls for change. Senator Kennedy called the institution a snake pit and stated that residents living in conditions like this were worse than those of animals. So it was really kind of an awakening because people saw for the first time, they saw in front of their eyes what was happening to people in these institutions. And there was a call for public reform and also the creation of the Developmental Disabilities Act. Next slide, please.
Terry, I went ahead and gave you control. So if you want to drive it yourself, you should be able to see those controls now.
I don't see the controls.
Eli, she muted herself the last time she tried to do that. That's why we're asking you to do it.
Okay, no problem.
Sorry. Okay, I got it now, I think.
Okay.
So we've also peppered a few lessons throughout this discussion because it's important to remember what we've learned and to reflect on that. And one of the things that we've learned is supporting others starts with simply seeing them and valuing their experiences. That's something we talk about today. That's a lesson from the past. And when people with disabilities were seen, when people saw what was happening to them, there was a call for change. And it's also important in the future. There's a quote here by Judy Heumann, who is really one of the leaders of the disability rights movement. You can't be what you can't see. And we need more role models for people with disabilities. We need people with disabilities out front and leading policy discussions, leading policy change, leading in the public sector, leading in business. It's important that people with disabilities are seen so that they can be role models for others, but also their experience really lends themselves to where we need to go and what we need to learn. Colleen or Parthy have anything to add?
Nope. I think we're ready for the first quiz question.
Okay, there we go.
So we're sprinkling quiz questions throughout too, everybody. Hi, again, I'm Parthy from the Partnership for People with Disabilities. And this is a little time for interaction. So we put our quiz questions for you here. And then if you could answer in the chat and we can see how people feel. And it's important to note there's not really one right answer here. There's a little bit of subjectivity. So Terry, Colleen, and I kind of weighed in on some of this and have an answer that we chose, but we want to hear what you think. So which 1960s event do you think sparked the beginning of the disability rights movement? Was it the Miracle Worker, the movie? Was it the parent movement started by the National Arc, the Arc in 1964? Ed Roberts, another disability leader that many of us have heard of, that advanced higher education and including people with disabilities, or the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. And let me just take a gander at this chat to see how people are. Oh, we got a mix. We got a mix here. So let's see what we came up with. Our answer, Ed Roberts. Ed Roberts, again, was the first student to attend higher ed at the University of Berkeley. He is an absolute pioneer that we learned so much from. But one of the key things that we're going to talk about today that we learned from him and from his friends and colleagues was how working together can move mountains. It can make a huge change. And his group of people with disabilities really were started the independent living movement and the establishment of the CILS, the Centers for Independent Living, who all of us work with so much and who are leaders in the disability field throughout the country. So Ed Roberts.
Ed is often referred to as the father of the disability rights movement.
So, so a little bit about us, and we're going to talk more and more as we go on about the DD network and the implications of the DD Act. So, as Terry mentioned, it was found in legislation, and it was born of all of the advancements with civil rights. So, around the same time, people with disabilities started asserting that they have rights too, and they want those rights to be recognized, and they want to be full members of community. So, the Developmental Disabilities Rights Act. And then also a national network, and we are part of that network. DD councils, developmental disability councils, protection and advocacy organizations and systems, and then finally university centers for excellence in intellectual and developmental disabilities. And it's important to note, we're not just here in Virginia, we're part of networks that are national, and we really rely on those national connections to help to learn from them, to help kind of push the whole country along in supporting the rights of people with disabilities. So we get we have a lot of advantages of being part of that national network. And then finally, we, along with many of you here that are attending today, share common values and have missions related to independence for people with disabilities, the ability to make choices and live the life that they want in community, to be in community, in schools, to be full members of school communities and in general ed classrooms, to be full members of community when kids graduate from school and have meaningful employment alongside their peers, to have empowerment, to know they have inherent value. They don't need to prove themselves just by being them. They are valued members of community that belong there. So those are things we all share in common with one another as DD agencies, but also with the DD community. And you are all part of that DD community. So let's go back one. Oh, there we go. I think we're having a little trouble with the slides here. Sorry about that. So again, there's kind of this slow progression, and I think it's slower than all of us want to, and it continues to be slow, but there is this progression. So Terry mentioned the 60s. We're moving into the 70s where people are gaining more and more rights. So you may have all heard of the Rehab Act, which again is foundational for making discrimination illegal for federally funded entities. So it's part of the very foundation of we belong here and we have a right to be here and we have a right to contribute to community. Then we have tweaks. We have the Developmental Disabilities Assistance Bill of Rights. So again, we should not be in institutions. We should not be segregated. We have a full right to be in the least restrictive environment that we can live in. Then again, we keep pushing. The definition for disability became less based in a diagnosis and much more about what supports you need to live your life. It's more functional. So again, small movements. Next slide, please. there's also a shift, and it's really important to note that we are still trying to realize this shift from trying to fix people and make them fit into a particular mold, um, and start to say, how do we support people so that they can live the life that they choose in community? So we don't need to make you like us. We need to make so the world support you the way that you need to be supported to be part of community. So
And Parthy, just as a sort of a context there too, if you remember, the institutions for people with developmental disabilities were called training centers. They were called schools. So they were really created with this idea of fixing the people who were there, even though they really had no commitment to actually doing anything around training or education.
thank you, Colleen. Yeah. Um, and again, we're still fighting this battle right now. The R word. They started to replace the R word with developmental disability, and it's a continuing battle. I feel like we've made headway. Every once in a while, I feel like we take a step back, but it started getting realized and be an expectation to use the word developmental disability. And then the population of developmental disability expanded and included cerebral palsy, epilepsy, and other conditions. Next slide, please. So, I mentioned this when we did our quiz, that part of what we want to really emphasize today is that Terry, Colleen, and I could get so much more done together than we could independently, and that working together, building coalitions, building collaborative partners is foundational to the disability movement. And we need to continue to do this. And sometimes it's really hard. And sometimes it feels like you potentially could be giving up something in order to collaborate. But we have learned these lessons over time that it takes more than one voice. It takes many voices working together to make change. So we really, everybody has heard this quote a million times, and you might roll your eyes, but it's really true that a small group can push things really hard, and a group can push much harder than one person. So that's one of the really important lessons of us talking to you today.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of the successes that we've had in Virginia are because of the collective actions of many. When you look at a lot of the policy change that we've had, better access, we still have a long way to go, but a lot of the successes that we've had, they don't ride on any one person's shoulders. They really belong to all of us, as a system of advocates, as a collective group that work together.
Thank you. Next slide, please. I'm the quiz person, so I've got another quiz question for you. Okay. Which 1970s movement do you think had the biggest cultural impact on the disability rights movement? So the Rehab Act, which I mentioned, which was kind of foundational for prohibiting discrimination, the first televised ADA awareness campaign, the Disability Rights March, or this one's interesting, the debut of The Bold and Beautiful, which included a person with a disability on as an actor. So what do you guys think?
Give you a minute before I go to the next slide.
Get a lot of A's and C's. Okay. Yes, and we will share the PowerPoint.
We
for
do.
sure.
We do
I
have a
think it's
few.
A.
We do have a few soap opera fans in the crowd here. I've seen a few D's.
I love a good soap opera. Okay, what's the next slide, please? C. Disability Rights March in Washington in 1977, and it really was kind of buoyed on by Section 504 and kind of what that impact was. And it said, people got up, made their voices heard, and made that law get signed. And we're seeing that lesson over and over again, too. When people make their voices heard and push, things can happen. So
yeah, and with that, what was so important about Section 504 and the fight for Section 504, it was the fight for regulations and to actually implement the law the law was passed and it was stagnant for a couple years. So yeah, Section 504 was passed, but there were no regulations. There was no accountability. There was no implementation. So it was really the march, the sit-ins that self-advocates, including Judy Heumann and Ed Roberts, facilitated, where they sat, was it 28 days
Yeah.
in federal offices to say, we want those regulations signed, and they were successful. So it was really that advocacy that pushed that forward. And if you're interested in that, I would encourage you to go to YouTube and Google the power of 504, where there's videos and documentaries on those sit-ins, which is just really impactful.
So the next slide. So we want to talk a little bit more about some of the history of the disability rights movement, but it's also important for us to know where we've come from, because really, if you start with Buck versus Bell and think about how far we have come as a society, it's pretty remarkable. But we also want to remind you that there have been significant setbacks at every stage of the movement. And for some of us, it feels right now like we're in a phase of setback. And we just want to remind you that we have to continue to persevere, even though it does feel like there are some setbacks that we're dealing with. So let's take a look at the 1980s, where really the understanding of serving people through the DD network, the way of involving people with developmental disabilities, continued to mature dramatically through the 80s. The 1980s was really when a lot of organizations stopped using the word that began with an R and began using the developmental disabilities description. Community services expanded and Medicaid funding for those services got better. Family advocacy networks really started to flex their muscle a little bit more. The DD Act itself that creates the three organizations presenting to you today added these intentional goals of independence, integration, productivity, and encouraged the use of people first language. So the next slide. But the era was also filled with some serious setbacks. As Terry mentioned, the Rehabilitation Act was passed in the early 70s. And whenever there's a new law like that, it takes federal agencies a while to develop the regulations that will enforce it. So federal agencies were working on those regulations, finally got them published. And then a new president was elected in 1980. And he announced that that the federal government was not going to enforce those regulations. So there had been this long period of dormancy in the 70s when the regulations were being developed. And as soon as everybody thought it was time for this law to have some teeth is when the federal government decided they were not going to enforce it. And I think that I was actually in the movement at that time, just to tell you a little how old I am. But I think for many of us, that felt like such a huge setback. There were also some interesting Supreme Court decisions that came out of the 80s that in some ways felt like they were advances, but then as we got into them, they really kind of seemed to be holding us back a little bit. One of them was called Youngberg versus Romeo, and it created a constitutional right to be free from abuse and neglect. But it gave great deference to the professionals in those facilities to figure out what constitutes abuse, what constitutes appropriate treatment for people with disabilities. So although, legally it felt like a huge score to have this established constitutional right, when it came down to actually getting something out of it, it became a real challenge. Another one out of the 80s, there were many, many Supreme Court cases dealing with conditions at Pennhurst. And Haldeman versus Pennhurst in 1984 did talk about those conditions at the Pennsylvania facility at Pennhurst, but there were some serious setbacks in that decision too. And we're going to talk about that in a couple of slides. And then this one I wanted to mention because I had a personal connection to this one. When I was working out in New Mexico, I worked on this case called Jackson versus Fort Stanton. And that was a case that the protection and advocacy and local lawyers brought to try to close the state hospitals they were called schools, training schools in New Mexico. And we lost. We got a finding from the court that there is no constitutional requirement to close those institutions. It did find that the conditions in the facilities were deplorable and that they had to be improved. And even though we lost that decision, the parties stayed with it and stayed with it and stayed with it to demand improved conditions at the facility, to the point where it was no longer practical to keep those facilities open. And the facilities closed about 6 years later, after we lost the decision to close those institutions. So I think this is really just a great example of sometimes a setback can feel like a real victory too. Next slide. Some of the things that happened in the next decade, as we all know, the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed, and it was based on some state laws like the Virginians with Disabilities Act and some great laws in other states. It guaranteed equal opportunity in really all aspects of civic life, employment, transportation, public accommodations, schools, everywhere people with disabilities could be. As we were pushing for the ratification of this law, we often said this is just like the Rehabilitation Act. So, nothing really to get concerned about here. But in fact, the ADA went much, much further than the Rehabilitation Act. And it was really a huge thing because the Rehabilitation Act covered only those things that received federal funds. And the ADA applied to everything that was in what's called interstate commerce. Next slide. Another significant decision that came out of this era was one you're all familiar with. Sometimes people think it's an actual law, but it's a Supreme Court decision where Lois Curtis and Elaine Wilson brought an action to get out of the state hospitals where they were confined. And they argued that the Americans with Disabilities Act provided that they should be served in the most integrated setting possible. They relied on a provision in the regulations that they referred to as the integration mandate. And the Supreme Court shockingly agreed that the Americans with Disabilities Act did require people to be served in the most integrated setting. It was really an enormous victory for people with disabilities, particularly those who were confined to institutions. But there was language in that act that said that some people can only be served in institutions. And so that was something that we as advocates have always had to struggle against, the argument that some people with disabilities actually belong in institutions. So let's go to the next slide. And as we talk about the setbacks that we faced and the way we've overcome those setbacks, I think it is important to remember that this is a long haul ahead of us. It is a marathon. It is a sprint, and we are going to get calf cramps along the way in this marathon, and we're going to need to stop for a water break from time to time. The marathon just ran through my neighborhood last weekend, so. But I think it's important for us to remember this quote that has often been used in the movement: "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." Next slide. Now
I'm going to add a little bit right here.
Okay.
Because I think it is really important to recognize that, things happen differently across states on different timelines. And just one example of that, I worked in Michigan in the early 80s. It was probably about 84. I was hired as a residential counselor at a group home. And when I was hired by the Washtenaw Association of Retarded Citizens. And it was during that time that there was a real push to get rid of the term mental retardation. And the Washtenaw Association of Retired Citizens changed its name to the Washtenaw Association for Community Advocacy. And there was really a push in Michigan at that time, recognizing that term is you know, demeaning, that people with disabilities don't like that term, and a real move to get mental retardation out of the system in Michigan. And this was in, again, 84, 85. And I came to Virginia in the early 90s and began working for a residential provider in 1991. It was actually March of 91, because on my first day of work, I went in and there was this big poster up here in Virginia 6 years later that celebrating March is Mental Retardation Month. Right. And I was just shocked when I saw it, because I was so used to, we don't use that word. And I can't believe I'm seeing it here and it's being celebrated as Mental Retardation Month. And that kind of change can be slow, in different states. It just happens on a different timeline depending on that state. And I have one other example related.
But just before you jump to the next example, just to show how slow it was in the 2010s when Virginia changed the Department of Mental Retardation to the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services. So it took a long time for Virginia to get on that bandwagon.
Yes, yes. And then with respect to Olmstead and the community integration mandate of the ADA, Olmstead was 1990. And it often takes a long time for federal rules and federal regulations to catch up with policy. And it was, in 2010, 2011, when DOJ came into Virginia, I think it was 2011, and into other states, claiming that their home and community-based services system weren't compliant with the community integration mandate of the ADA and of Olmstead, ensuring that community-based services were available. One of the reasons in Olmstead folks couldn't get into the community was because the community-based system wasn't developed enough, and where states needed to start putting resources in and investing in their community-based system. So, DOJ caught up with Olmstead and the ADA and started going into states, and that's when states started going to Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services saying, hey, we have DOJ coming in saying our home and community-based services system isn't compliant with these federal rules. And, DOJ or, CMS, can you help us? And that's when CMS was like, we need to get caught up. And out of that, we had the home and community-based services settings rule that put new requirements in place for our waiver system to ensure that people have autonomy, that they have choice, that their rights are respected, that they can have visitors at any time, they can choose where and how they live. And it was really, the waiver system catching up to a 1990 Olmstead decision in the ADA. That's how long it can take. But it's the vigilance of advocates saying, hey, what about, we need to do better, we need to change, that push us forward, even with federal rules and laws.
I was just going to add one last thing, since we all can chime in on this one. When we were talking through these slides, I mentioned to both Terry and Colleen that the OT said this to me with my son when he was, 3 years old. And my son has autism and was getting, he was going to sessions every week. And she said this to me, and I felt like my head was going to explode. I had 2 little kids, and he wasn't making the progress that we all wanted him to make. And we recognize how hard this is, that this is people's lives. And we're not kind of not acknowledging that and not feeling empathy around how frustrating all this is, and how you want change and you need change to happen as quickly as possible. We're just acknowledging some of the reality of it. And my son's 19 years old now, and ready to graduate. And, she was right. It was kind of slow and steady, never, lots of hills and valleys, but, it's a long haul, and we are part of that long haul with you and committed to continuing to push in that long haul, but we very rarely get these quick wins. So anyway.
Let's go ahead and move to the next quiz then. So what do you think? What is the event or the milestone from the 1980s that had the greatest impact on the disability rights movement? And you can put your answers in the chat here. Was it the passage of the ADA, the landmark civil rights law? Was it Crip Camp, which some of us have learned about through recent documentaries, but a summer camp that really emboldened the activism of people with disabilities in the 70s and 80s? Was it the creation of disability-friendly education programs, which allowed more people with disabilities to be educated in our public schools? Or was it the 1981 Disability Rights March in Washington that pressured Congress to pass disability rights legislation? What do you think was the landmark, not the landmark, but the event that really had the greatest impact? And before we jump to the next slide, I just want to tell you that when we were preparing for this, we actually kind of debated which ones we thought were the right answers or not. And I don't think we're trying to tell you that there's probably not a right answer. If you or somebody you knew attended Crip Camp, then that's probably going to matter to you a lot. If you attended the Disability Rights March in Washington, that's probably going to feel like it was life-changing to you. But if you were in school in the 80s and 90s, those are probably going to feel like the most important things. But next slide, please. We felt like really it was the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act that felt like a true game changer. I don't know if you've had the chance to actually look at the ADA in detail, but it is a phenomenally detailed piece of legislation. It has essentially a building code in it, which no other federal law really has. It has sweeping protections for people with disabilities really in every area of life, like employment and public accommodations and telecommunications. It's why our telecommunication systems are so accessible and so fantastic today. It really was pivotal in advancing opportunities for people. And we hope that it sticks around for a while. All right, let's go to the next slide. And colleagues, I'll tell you, we're running just a little bit behind schedule, so I'll try to pick the pace up a little bit here. We want to turn back to the discussion about the Developmental Disabilities Act and some of the things that were really key about it. The law, it's a federal law. It created our three agencies, but it also starts out with what it calls the Bill of Rights. And it says that that people with developmental disabilities have the right to make informed choices, to live in the community, and to have full rights as citizens. People with developmental disabilities have the right to have friendships and relationships, to live lives that are free of abuse, neglect, and exploitation, and that they have the right to be fully integrated and included in society. That's in federal law. That's in what is called the DD Act Bill of Rights.
And
Go ahead.
rights is guiding for all of us. It's like a guiding light for all of us in the work that we do.
Which will, if you can jump to the next slide, I'll get to that too. Yes, that one. Here's the setback with it. In that Pennhurst versus Halderman case that I told you about, the Supreme Court looked at those rights in the DD Bill of Rights and said that those are just goals. Those are just aspirational. They cannot be enforced in court. So really took the wind out of the sail in that Bill of Rights part of the legislation. Except as Terry said, we, the three DD network agencies, really consider those to be foundational to how we do our work. We pay attention to that Bill of Rights in developing everything that we do.
And because of the DD Act, our DD Act programs are in every state and U.S. territory. So we're not, just in Virginia. So there are 56 DD councils across the country, University Center for Excellence, P&As, like the Disability Law Center. So we're also a national network that support each other as well and learn from each other.
Yeah, so though I would say we probably considered it a setback, that decision was reached by the Supreme Court, we still continue to live by that mandate, and I think it drives a lot of really important systems change. And Parthy and Terry, I'll tell you that I think we've caught up, so go for it.
Colleen's our timekeeper. Thank you. And just to talk just briefly about the current definition of DD. So this is the definition in the DD Act, the definition that we use when we're talking about DD. And, as the DD Council, the Virginia Board for People with Disabilities is Virginia's DD Council. Our focus and priority is people with developmental disabilities. And when we talk about that, a developmental disability is severe. It's a severe and chronic disability that begins before the age of 22. It's likely to continue indefinitely, and it causes substantial limitations in 3 major life areas, such as self-care, learning, mobility, self-direction, independent living, economic self-sufficiency. So, and requires lifelong coordinated supports. So when we speak of developmental disability, that's the broad definition that we're speaking of.
So again, just a little bit about us, and we'll go into more detail in some subsequent slides. But if you see up at top of the slide, there is a stool, and a lot of times they call the DD Act agencies like a stool because there's 3 of us and we're kind of holding things up. And so we have the DD councils, and they drive advocacy, capacity building, and systems change through activities like talking with the legislature, through grant making. Are some examples, and that's, of course, the Virginia Board for People with Disabilities. We have our protection and advocacy systems. They, as Colleen mentioned, use the law to help advance the rights of people with disabilities. And in Virginia, that's the Disability Law Center. And then finally, the UCEDS, University Centers for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities. And we focus on education and training, research, and providing community services through our projects. And I'll talk a little bit about our projects in a second. And again, in Virginia, that's the Partnership for People with Disabilities. I think there's 67, 68 maybe now across the country. There are several in a couple of big states. So those are those DD Act organizations. Next slide, please. So why do we get this funding? And that has been in the conversation this year more than it has in the past. And so what we do, and we've talked throughout about the values of our DD agencies and organizations, but it's to provide kind of these 4 core foundational values. Self-determination for people with disabilities, having the ability to make choice and have control over your life. Independence. And independence doesn't mean you do everything on your own. Independence is being able to identify when you want supports and when you don't want supports. So having that independence to live the life that you want. Productivity. Having high expectations in school and being included in school. Leaving school and having meaningful things to do during the day, like work. Competitive employment when you graduate, or post-secondary education. And then being part of community, not being in institutions or in places where you don't meet people, make friends, and be a part of your greater community and contribute. And all of this is acknowledging that there's a lot of cultural diversity in the United States, and we are to address that diversity in the work that we do. We are supporting all people with disabilities, and we need to really cater our programs and supports to be culturally competent. Next slide, please.
So if there's any takeaway that we hope that you get from this presentation today, and we're going to tell you a little bit more about all of us, but please know that we work together and we work with you. We work with all of you to support the rights of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities in Virginia. As another Kennedy said here, we have a quote here from Eunice Kennedy Shriver: "The right to play on any playing field, you have earned it. The right to study in any school, you have earned it. The right to hold a job, you have earned it." So before we move to the next slide, which is going to be a quiz, I just did want to respond. It looks like others have taken the answer into the chat also. Somebody said, where does traumatic brain injury fall in all of this? And because I'm a lawyer, the answer is going to be, it depends. That's the answer we always give to everything. But as Terry had told you, the definition of a developmental disability is it begins before age 22. So if somebody sustains a brain injury before 22, has disabilities that are likely to continue indefinitely, and if it causes the brain injury causes substantial limitations in 3 major life areas, it will be considered a developmental disability. All right, so let's go ahead and jump to the next quiz question. So in the 80s and the 90s, what happened in pop culture that you think best reflects the growing visibility of disability rights? This same era when the DD Act is beginning to talk about inclusion and advocacy, but what's going on in pop culture? We've got Corky Thatcher, who is a TV character on Life Goes On. We got Christy Brown in the movie My Left Foot. Lieutenant Dan in Forrest Gump is a veteran with a disability and demonstrates some of the challenges that veterans were facing. And then D, we've got all of the above, because in the 80s and the 90s, they finally started listening to disabled voices, to voices of people with disabilities. I think we're all going to be in agreement on this one.
I think, Colleen, you're right, though. If some of these are really close to people's heart and they're choosing the
Right.
one that's closest to their heart. So I
Right.
think we got a lot of D's, but we got some people who really meant something to them, some of these other ones. So yes, we see that, and we realize some of these are going to be what's meaningful to you.
Right. But we kind of felt like all of them were important, and many, many other things that were happening in pop culture with respect to people with disabilities. And we feel like it's kind of helped move society along to be able to help people with disabilities be visible in the world, promotes inclusion, dignity of people with disabilities, and participation in all aspects of community life. All right, so next slide, and next one's not me.
I will take it away.
Okay.
We're going to get a little bit more into the specifics with each of our agencies. And I think it's really, just incredible when the DD Act was developed and written that it purposefully designed 3 entities, 3 agencies in each state that have the same mission, that follow the same, Bill of Rights, same overall purpose, but who do it in different ways and with different expertise. So the Virginia Board for People with Disabilities serves as Virginia's DD Council, Developmental Disabilities Council. So who are we? We have a 40-member board, and we have a supervisory board that really guides and directs our work. And one of the reasons that's so important is that based on the DD Act, 60% of our members must be people with disabilities, or family members, parents or guardians of a person with a DD. So the majority leverage on our board are really the voices of people with disabilities and their parents or family members. We have a small staff team that accomplishes a lot of work at the direction of our board. Our board members are the 60% of our board members that are people with disabilities and family members are all appointed by the governor. There's a process to get appointed. We have that on our website if you're interested in being appointed to the Virginia Board for People with Disabilities. And then we have a number of other representatives that are also required in the DD Act that are state agencies. So our state Medicaid agency, Department of Behavioral Health, Department for Aging and Rehab Services, Virginia Department of Health, Department for Deaf and Hard of Hearing is also a member of our board, and Department for Blind and Vision Impaired. I know I'm leaving Department of Education, but it's a purposeful mix of people with disabilities, family members, and state agencies that influence, policy and services that can talk to one another, learn from one another, and really through our board and those connections work to make policy change. So it's a really unique composition. What do we do? So we lead through advocacy, capacity building, and systems change activities, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. But those are the charge of DD councils in the DD Act. advocacy, capacity building, and systems change. So that's where we focus our work. We have limited resources, so we have to prioritize our work through those limited resources. 87% of our funding is federal funding, a very small amount of state funding, and it's our board through our state plan that helps us with those priorities. And why do we do our work? This is our mission statement, again, developed by our board to create a Commonwealth that advances opportunities for independence, personal decision-making, and full participation in community life for individuals with developmental disabilities. A little bit more about what we do. I mentioned our 5-year state plan. We're actually in the process of developing our next 5-year state plan. We operate by a federal fiscal year. So our current state plan ends at the end of September, and we'll be starting a new state plan. But that state plan is, again, developed by our board through a lot of public input to help us really identify what are the priorities that we can impact with our role and our limited resources. We are a state agency. That also makes us unique. We sit in the executive branch under the Secretary of Health and Human Resources. So we are a state agency, and that gives us an opportunity to advise the governor, the Secretary of Health and Human Resources, and legislators on service needs and gaps. So we do that in a number of different ways, but what's really unique about this opportunity that we sit in state government is that we can advocate through those government channels with the secretary, with other agencies, and with legislators. We are not able to lobby because we receive federal funding, so lobbying is prohibited. So we don't have a legislative agenda like many organizations, advocacy organizations have legislative agendas, and we don't put forward legislation. But we are able to educate policymakers and legislators on the impact of legislation on people with disabilities. So we take that education stance when we're going to the General Assembly, when we're talking with legislators, how a certain bill or a certain policy impacts people with disabilities in a positive way or a negative way, to try to influence. We have a unique opportunity to influence change a little bit differently because we are inside government, and we try to take advantage of that through those channels. We also fund grant projects and other projects that bring change to policies, programs, and systems. So when we look at our grant projects, we look at that as opportunities for capacity building and systems change. So we use a portion of our federal funds to fund grant projects that may be a demonstration project, may develop capacity in an area where we need to build up community services and supports that support our state plan. And then we also train advocates to step up to leadership roles. It's really important that people with disabilities, family members, are leading a leading voice in creating change, and we provide training on how to do that. And we are a strong supporter of self-advocacy. A little bit on how we do that with our grant projects. So these are just a few of the projects that we're currently funding, the ARC of Virginia and the Ally Alliance. So, we are required by the DD Act to support a self-advocacy organization or that's led by self-advocates. And we've done that recently by funding the Ally Alliance, which has done some incredible work and has really been a leading voice for some positive change. We have a current grant to expand customized employment with DARS to create employment opportunities that are really individualized and support people in a customized way. We also want to be responsive to the needs of populations that are non-English speaking. So we're working with the Independent Center of Northern Virginia on a project to provide information, resources, training to the Spanish-speaking community in Spanish, so that they can make sure that they are able to access services and resources that they may need. We had a grant with James Madison University, Ability First, to support people with health and wellness, health and well-being. So through our grant projects and through our funding, we endeavor to move forward. We also do work in policy. I already mentioned that. One of the things that we do every year are 2 policy assessments of the disability services system. And we use those policy assessments to educate, to inform, to educate legislators, but also advocacy organizations that oftentimes take up recommendations in our assessments that move forward as bills and policy change. And all of the stuff I'm mentioning, you can find on our website if you want to learn more. So I encourage you to go to our website, which is at the end of the presentation. There's a link. And we do a lot of work group participation. We sit on a lot of state work groups and work with a lot of stakeholder organizations and try to collaborate and be a partner with other advocacy organizations. We've been doing a lot of work lately in information access. One of the things that we hear often from people is that information on resources, on services is hard to find, hard to understand, hard to use. It's not actionable. This is a systemic issue that we've been devoting a lot of time to in the last few years through our Information Access Champions Initiative, through training to HHR agency staff, and other activities to really try to put a spotlight on the problems people with disabilities and families have accessing information and what we can do as a system to change it, because it's a problem that belongs to all of us, not one agency or organization. It's a systems problem. We also have our fabulous training programs. I know we have a number of alumni who are on today. Thank you for joining us, alumni of our Partners in Policymaking program, which is a leadership and advocacy training program for parents of young children with disabilities and adult self-advocates, and our Youth Leadership Academy, which is a leadership program for high school students with disabilities. Again, trying to develop the next generation of leaders, trying to help people connect and become strong advocates and collaborators. And we have also our training alumni and our statewide workshops. We're sitting in one of them right now. Our training alumni help develop topics and are great supporters of providing us direction in what's important to people with disabilities and families. What are they hearing? What do people need to hear about? What should we focus our workshops on? So that's a strong connection. And then we also have a self-advocate scholarship fund, the importance of people with disabilities going to conferences, participating in learning opportunities. And we provide funding for them to do that. So I encourage you to go to our website and learn more about these activities and reach out to us if you'd like to know more. Oh, you're on mute, Carthy.
Sorry, rookie move, guys. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the Partnership for People with Disabilities, Virginia, as you said. So I've mentioned this before, and I think Penny said it at the beginning, that we're a pretty large organization. We have around, I think we actually have more like 125 staff that work at the partnership across the state. So while we're housed at VCU, we have people all over Virginia doing work in communities. Many of our staff are people with disabilities or family members or professionals who have worked in schools. And it's really important because we really want to make our projects relevant in the community and to influence policy and practice. So having that lens of lived experience is infused in everything we do and makes it meaningful. So it's really important to us. As I mentioned before, we do research, we develop projects and test them to make sure they have the impact that we want them to have so that when we replicate, we get the outcomes that we want. And all of it is to support people with disabilities, families, and the professionals who work with them. So those are our stakeholders. Why we do our work, and we've talked about this throughout, we want people to have the lives that they want in community. And these projects and supports that we do all help kind of undergird community so that people have the supports that they need to be successful. Next slide, please. So we work with lifespan. tiny babies all the way up until older adults. Our projects touch professionals who work with all of those groups, and directly we have some direct service projects where we're working with these populations. So we're lifespan focused. We have 4 main buckets of projects: early childhood, education, health, and community living. And oftentimes the projects intersect across those areas, because if you're working with health, oftentimes it's so that you're healthy so you can be part of community. Or education can also help transition out into community living. So a lot of our projects cross over. And there's a reason why they named us the Partnership for People with Disabilities. It's because it is in our DNA and in our charge to partner with not only Terry and Colleen and the work that they do, but with all of you, with people with disabilities, with families, with state agencies, with nonprofits, with SILs, with everybody you can think of, to make things happen. We are not supposed to be kind of going it alone. It is in our charge to work with communities to achieve positive outcomes for people with disabilities and their families. Next slide, please. So Terry gave you a little taste of what they do at the board, and I'm going to do the same. As I said, we have over 40 projects, so I'm not going to go into all of them. I would love to, but it might be a little too much. So I'm going to highlight a few that are they illustrate what we do. So we have projects that work with transition. So kids leaving school, especially kids with more significant disabilities, and how are they going to have meaningful employment or meaningful activities when they graduate? And Project Peace is focused on that. It's developing a model for employment for kids with more significant support needs. And we're working with 2 communities, but this model can be applied in any community. So that's the purpose of the project, is to develop this model that could work anywhere. And we have partners with DARS, we have partners with the school divisions, we have partners in industry and business for that project. The Center for Family Involvement, a lot of people know about CFI. We have all parents that are working with parents to provide emotional support and systems navigational support. And they do that, again, across all lifespan issues. So you just have a child that's diagnosed with autism and you don't know what to do. And you are processing it just yourself, and you might need another parent to process that with. That's what CFI is all about. So that's another a large project that we have, that we partner with a lot of state agencies and others to make happen. Lots and lots of work in schools. So how do school professionals feel comfortable working with kids with disabilities? Because guess what? They're everywhere. And they need to be confident. They need to know these kids belong. And so we are doing training and technical assistance on everything you can imagine to make sure that kids succeed in school. And lots and lots of partners, again, with the school divisions and with VDOE on making that happen. We have a host of projects that train people with disabilities to be leaders in helping implement some of our models that we develop. So our training, LEAP, which is Leadership for Empowerment and Abuse Prevention, is focused on how people with disabilities can identify what's healthy and not healthy in relationships and know what to do if something isn't healthy. And we have trainers with disabilities working with co-trainers across the state to help train people with disabilities about that they, again, don't need to experience abuse, and they know what to do if they're experiencing abuse. CREATIA is another newish project where we're using theater-based interventions to help people learn how to talk with their doctor. So we have theater professionals that are working alongside people with disabilities and people with disabilities at leadership roles in this project, developing a model that we're going to disseminate throughout the state and throughout the country. A new project that I'm really excited about is we are doing training and technical assistance nationally on people with disabilities who receive Social Security and want to work. So it's benefits counseling. So we are going to infuse that content in all of our projects, because Social Security is, 1, very complicated and confusing, and 2, is a big part of the lives of people with disabilities. So we want to understand it better and infuse it in everything we do. So we're very excited about this project. And then, of course, very near and dear to me is we have these projects where we are learning from people with disabilities. They are training us. on how to listen better, how all professionals can listen better to people with disabilities, and how we can learn from them to make all the work that we do hit the mark, because who knows better than them? So we have a host of projects, and we try to infuse it in everything, but we have a host of projects that are just trained specifically in one area. And I saw a lot of people on this call are helping us with this, or on this Zoom, is with research. People with disabilities think, oh, this might not be for me. And we're trying and we're succeeding in getting them to tell us what we should be researching and what is meaningful to them and what they want to see as outcomes. So disability leadership is, again, in all of our DNA as DD agencies, but something we really try to make happen on a day-to-day basis. Thank you.
All right, next slide. So as we've been talking about the Developmental Disabilities Act and the three legs of the stool here. The first leg that you heard about is the Virginia Board for People with Disabilities. And in the DD Act, they kind of are brilliantly thought about as the policy advisors. Then you heard about the partnership. In the DD Act, they're referred to as the University Center for Excellence. And they are really supposed to be the research leaders. And then there's us. We are the protection and advocacy system, and we are considered to be the lawyers for the system. So the three of us work together. All of us do a little bit of training. All of us do a little bit of policy. All of us do a little bit of research. But we're happy to have somebody really kind of act as the leader in areas that might be somewhat outside of our expertise. So the Disability Law Center of Virginia is the protection and advocacy system that's created under the Developmental Disabilities Act. We are a nonprofit, and we have lawyers and social workers and case managers and all sorts of other non-professional, non-attorney professional staff working on working at the agency, all for the purpose of enforcing the legal rights of people with disabilities. We try to focus on legal rights issues that are going to have the greatest impact in the community, because there are almost 2 million people with disabilities in Virginia, and there's about 34 of us. So we absolutely can't do every issue. We can't represent every person. We really try to use our resources in as smart a fashion as possible by focusing on the things where we're going to get as much mileage as possible. Our mission is to promote independence, choice, and self-determination to protect legal, human, and civil rights. And this one is sometimes the hardest one for us to have to deal with on a daily basis, but to eliminate abuse, neglect, and discrimination of people with disabilities throughout the Commonwealth. Next slide. Just a few little tidbits about us here. We do represent all disabilities, not just intellectual or developmental disabilities. And as I said, there's almost 2 million people in Virginia who identify as having disabilities. In order to do the system-driven work that we do, every year we identify specific goals, areas within those goals where we really want to focus our work. And then we develop very specific objectives that identify how many cases we want to take, what kinds of cases we want to take, what sorts of training materials we want to develop, so that we are very, very planful in the work that we do. We're fortunate that we have a lot of volunteers helping us to do our statewide advocacy, and our staff is located primarily in Richmond, but we do have staff in other parts of the state to try to get us into other parts of the Commonwealth. It's our mandate under many of our grants to try to resolve things at the lowest level possible. And so a lot of times people come to us and they want to sue. And we really are kind of obligated to try to resolve things without going to court. But we will bring a court action when we need to. I was just explaining to someone earlier this morning that we have not had to bring a court action in a long time, because merely the threat of it has been able to make issues go away that are troublesome. We work very closely with state agencies, with legislators and other policymakers to strengthen the rights of people with disabilities. Next slide. I mentioned we work with all disabilities, not just intellectual and developmental disabilities. We began as a developmental disability protection and advocacy system. But as years progressed, Congress gave us more and more responsibility for enforcing the legal rights of people with disabilities. They created a program for us to enforce the rights of people with mental illness, what we call the PAMI program, Protection and Advocacy of Individuals with Mental Illness. When the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed, Congress created a special program to enable us to enforce that and other laws throughout the country called the Protection and Advocacy of Individual Rights. And really on that one, we will deal with all sorts of disabilities, not just mental illness, not just cognitive disabilities. Our client assistance program charges us to work with the Department of Aging and Resource Rehabilitation Services to help people who are having a difficult time navigating that system. We've been charged by Congress to review the accounts of recipients of Social Security who also have representative payees, just to make sure that their funds are not being abused. We have a program to help people who receive Social Security be able to go back to work. That's called the Protection and Advocacy for Beneficiaries of Social Security. We also have a program to help people receive assistive technology. We have one specifically to help people with traumatic brain injury to receive services that they're entitled to. We have a little bit of discretionary funding that we use for programs too. So when you put all of our projects together, we can serve any kind of disability and any legal rights issue that could come up. We just simply don't have the resources to serve every person and every issue that comes up. And that's why we focus our stuff on systemic issues. So I think we're doing well with time. Let's go. Hey, you jumped to the answer too soon. Let's get to the next quiz question, and because it's a court decision case, let's hear what you think. What was the most important court decision from the 1980s and the 1990s for people with disabilities? Was it Halderman versus Pennhurst, which really did identify deplorable conditions at the Pennhurst facility in Pennsylvania? Was it the New York State Association for Retarded Children versus Carey, which eventually led to the closure of the Willowbrook State Hospital? Was it Olmsted versus Lois Curtis, which recognized the statutory right for people with disabilities to live in the most integrated setting possible? Or was it Jackson versus Fort Stanton, which I told you about, a case out in New Mexico that found that there was no obligation to close the training center, but it had its closure anyway? What do people think? Which one of those do you think is the most important court decision from the 1980s and the 1990s?
Got a lot of C's. We're seeing a lot of C's.
A lot of C's in there?
But there are some B's because I think people who lived in New York, it was a big deal to the New Yorkers.
That's right. That's right. And if you lived in Pennsylvania, then Pennhurst is probably going to be the winner for you. And I don't know if we've got anybody on the call who comes from New Mexico, but you would find that the Jackson versus Fort Stanton case was pretty meaningful out there as well. Let's jump to the next slide. We debated it a little bit, but really we kind of were consistent in thinking that Olmsted was an important decision. It really recognized what is called the integration mandate, that states are mandated to provide services in the most integrated setting possible. And as a result of that case, every state started to develop a plan to discharge people from institutional settings and to improve community-based settings. Now, some of those plans were not very good. I don't think Virginia's Olmsted plan was very good. And as we know, eventually the Department of Justice had to come in and provide a little bit more incentive to the Commonwealth to create better community-based settings. But it was important that the states, for the first time after the Olmsted decision, were starting to think about this in a very methodical way, in a very planful way.
I thought it was great. Supreme Court looked at the community integration mandate of the ADA and really kind of held that up.
Yep.
Because that's also been, an important aspect of change and, that we hear for community-based services.
That's right. The integration mandate. That's right. All right. So ladies, we're doing fine with time. So we could spend a lot of time on the road ahead if we'd like to.
And I think that's the reason why a lot of people are here is, we're in this place and what do we do now? And I think it's important to note that all of this that we have talked about in the history ties to where we are right now. And the lots of lessons in there apply to our situation. So starting out, where do we see some of our big challenges in Virginia in particular, but nationally too? Um, you know, all of us that work in these systems recognize that it's very siloed. And when you're in early intervention, you're in early intervention. They don't talk a lot about school. When you're in school, they're not always talking about what happens after school, whether that be post-secondary, whether you're trying to access supports and community. The systems is very siloed. And so we have a lot of work to do around that collaboration. We have a lot of work to continue to do and making inroads in talking about a whole life rather than the pieces and parts. We know that the direct support workforce is at the foundation of quality services, and we know that it's barely a livable wage. And people can't provide good supports if they can't support themselves. So the system needs to be the home and community-based services system and Medicaid are incredibly important, and they need to be able to adequately fund a system that people rely on for their life. So rates is a big issue. We talked about the marathon and how frustrating that marathon can be. And so it takes a long time to make change in these complicated systems. So it's a slow go. And you're kind of in it for the long haul, and you make little pieces of progress. And then every once in a while, something pretty massive happens and it feels great. But, 5 steps forward, 2 steps back. So it's important. It's important to keep pushing. Virginia has this pretty unique situation in that one-term governor. And what it creates is a lot of chaos that we kind of have a governor and that person appoints all these positions, and then it turns over. And when there's a change in the political affiliation, it changes over kind of more often. So we're adjusting to that right now. And that could feel good at times. It can feel very chaotic at times, but it necessitates relationship building because it doesn't matter what political party's in charge, people with disabilities and families still need supports. And so we need to continue to make connections and build partnerships with new people in leadership positions. And we have to do it quite frequently in Virginia. Terry also talked about information access, and the board has absolutely been a leader in convening groups, including me, in how we communicate to people with disabilities and families and professionals, and how we make that information accurate and streamlined and easily accessible. So again, a lot of work to do in that area, but the board has been very committed to bringing groups together to have this conversation, is doing all this work with state agencies on their websites and the information that they provide to people, and how they are trained in how to develop materials that are in easy read language for people with disabilities and families. So we have to continue to work really hard and not confusing people. And I can, again, I work in this field. I have for my entire career. And when I try to access things for my son, I have to read things 10 times and then ask a friend. So I think we have our work cut out for us here. So, kind of the big picture, we have to continue to be advocates. And it doesn't always mean that you're going to do a sit-in for 30 days at a federal agency. It may mean that you make your voice heard in your local community in talking to your principal, or talking to your teacher, or talking to your board of supervisors. It can happen at any level. It can be just make your voice heard to your doctor, that we have to make people recognize the specific needs of people with disabilities and their families. And a lot of times, we talked about the good intent with people being in institutions. It's not that people don't want to do it. Sometimes they simply don't know. And so really talking and partnering with the people in your life and the people in your family members' lives and the people that you work with to communicate the needs of people with disabilities is essential. So please be an advocate.
And Parthy, I put a couple of links in the chat. I can repost them again. One of them is how to find the contact information for your congressional representative. And then one is how to find the contact information for your representative in the state legislature. Those are great people to be sharing your story with.
Yeah, and just to add, I think it really is important to, not only acknowledge but understand what we mean by shared challenges, and that there isn't one owner to any of these problems. They're across the system, the system silos, the inadequate rates, the slow pace of implementation, leadership change, information access. You can't point, some problems are really easy to define, and where do we need to go to fix this? This is an issue that needs to be fixed, and it's clear on what needs to be done, whether it's through policy or legislation. These issues are a part of our system. They're systemic, and it's not any one agency or any one person or any one division or any one community. They're across the system. So, it really takes working together in a supportive and collaborative way to try to peel back as much as we can. What can we do? What can we do as a network? What can we do individually? What can we do in collaboration as a coalition to move us forward on some of these really big, difficult problems? And one of the bullet points here is change in leadership. And I've worked for state agencies for a long time, and whenever you have a new administration, and it's not anybody's intention, but you have new priorities. You have agencies that have are really changing leadership. And when you have a big change in leadership, you have a big change in direction, and everybody under them falls into that new direction, and it creates a little bit of havoc and things that have been moving along or that we have some momentum on kind of stalling. So how do we work together to recognize when that's happening and to say, wait a minute, this is something that we've all been working on for a long time, and we need to keep it going. We need to keep these conversations going. We need to keep moving forward and really try to minimize the 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, because it can be really challenging. And it's just, again, the importance of working in collaboration with each other, working together with one voice where we can, because that single voice, when we are all working in the same direction, rowing in the same direction, we can have the biggest impact. And, sometimes it's impact in moving forward, but sometimes it's impact in, stopping going backwards. Sometimes just maintaining and staying where we're at is a success. So, we need to, really be mindful and thoughtful about that as we're thinking about our advocacy, in over the next couple of years.
And Terry, I think if you put up the next slide, that'll really kind of condense some of the thoughts. Oh no, it's the one after that I was thinking, but this is a good slide to talk about too.
Well, these are some key focus areas when we look at the road ahead. We have those systems issues that are really, shared issues, but some key focus areas within those issues, sustaining our home and community-based services and community supports, making sure that we don't, backslide. This is one of those places where, holding on to what we have and making it better is really important, and making sure that people are able to get the supports they need. Expanding access to affordable and accessible housing. This is something we all hear about a lot. People want to live in their own homes, in their communities. They can't afford it. It's not an issue that's specific to people with disabilities, but the affordability of housing, the accessibility of housing is a barrier. It's a barrier to independent living. It's a barrier to choice. It's a barrier to access to the community, and something that we're going to be focusing on, and all of us together. Strengthening the DSP workforce, as Parthy talked about so well, how critical the direct care workforce is to supporting people with disabilities. And if they don't have a livable wage, if they can't put a roof over their head and their family's head, how do we expect them to really support people in a meaningful way? We need to make sure that they're supported. They're such a big part of the community. Centering lived experience and policy. This is something I think we've all tried to get much better at. And acknowledge just much more often and intentionally the importance of listening to people and their lived experience, whether it's a person with disability, a family member, even professionals. I hear from professionals how challenging it is when they don't have the resources people need and they can't direct people in the right place. And, that's, something we need to also understand. How do we support people who support people with disabilities? And understanding what those experiences are. So we're really trying to listen, with a really close ear. I know we all are, for that greater understanding, so that, we can participate in advocacy and building community.
So we've got about 5 minutes before we want to jump to the Q&A.
I'll jump to the next one.
So, and I was noticing this in the chat, and we can talk about this during the Q&A about what to focus on. But some of the just kind of key takeaways for what you can do. We've talked about telling your story. I was just up in DC, and the thing that the Congress people were most interested in, senators, their staff were most interested in, are the stories. How is this hitting people's lives? You work with the communities that you connect with. It could be the ARC, it could be the Autism Society, it could be one of us, to tell your story and get your stories down so that we can communicate those out to really characterize what's going on and how changes are affecting people's lives. We talked all about building community this whole time. Find your people. It may be at the local level, it may be support groups, it may be you're part of partners, or you're part of kind of an official training program. It may be that you are connected to national networks. That it doesn't matter who those are. It's what's comfortable to you and being connected in. This is hard work and can be very hard on your psyche. So try to find the joy in your life and be happy with what the good things that happen in your lives. And I think we all have to do that at times when it can be a grind. So we want people to, live their best life and find joy in their day to day. And if they can't find joy in their day to day, then connect to those communities to help you find that joy. Again, using your voice is telling your story, making your voice heard. We've talked so much about our history and all the struggles that have come before this time. And, that can be sad to think about how difficult it was, but it also can be empowering to know that people made things happen. And we need that right now. We need to know that it was very hard and people pushed and there was advocacy and they made change, and we can do it again. So onlookers struggled with others. And then again, we keep saying this over and over again, share your knowledge, connect, build partnerships, and continue to educate the community on the rights of people with disabilities.
And on that one, the building community, the connecting with other people, I mean, we really learned some new techniques for that during COVID. It used to be, it had to be a very much in-person kind of activity, but we now know how to do that much better. So it is important for us to try to make those connections using every tool that's available to us.
Oops. Did I do it again? Okay.
And we just had to say this one more time because I haven't said it 15 times during this presentation, that working together is stronger than working separately. And we really need to find unity in this very divisive time. So, please, please, let's work together, all of us, and try to work through our differences, because we all have differences. Try to work through those differences and really elevate the voice of people with disabilities and the needs of people with disabilities. So we are committing to work together and with all of you. So please connect and reach out, and we can make change. And we can make change.
One comment to that. I was thinking back to Bobby Silverstein, who is a disability rights advocate, passed away a few years ago. Used to do a lot of training with partners, and he used to talk about negotiating and negotiating skills. And I think about what he told us when you're negotiating or you have differences of opinions, that you can be hard on the issues but soft on the people. You can stick to your guns and you can be hard on your issues, hard on your principles, but soft on the people, especially people who you're aligned with in what our ultimate goal and ultimate mission is, as advocates, as supporters of disability rights and the disability rights movement. We need to be kind to each other. We can have our own thoughts and opinions and be hard on those, but we should be soft on the people and kind to each other.
I think we have another quiz question, right?
Last one. I think it's Terry.
Okay. Which recent film or show most powerfully reflects the goals of the DD Act, empowering people with disabilities to lead self-determined lives? CODA, which is a deaf family story centered on love, independence, and belonging. And that CODA stands for Children of Deaf Adults. A Quiet Place, featuring a deaf actress as in a suspense thriller. The Last of Us, featuring authentic casting of an actor with Down syndrome. Avatar, The Way of Water, about transformation and resilience, but not disability focused.
I'm with you, Monique. I have not seen I don't think I've seen any of these, so I just had to go with the vote of my colleagues here.
We're seeing a lot of
Okay.
we
Yeah,
got
a lot of A's. D. Okay. And what
drum roll.
we chose CODA. It brought authentic deaf representation to mainstream audiences and emphasized the DDX core values: community inclusion, self-advocacy, and equal opportunity. And it really shifted public perception of disability and communication access. I think, didn't it win an Oscar, an Academy Award?
Yes.
I think it did, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Put it up on the screen again.
Can you go back to the movies?
You want to watch them?
Moniqu's gonna check out her Amazon account and see if they're available.
CODA, A Quiet Place, The Last of Us, and Avatar, The Way of Water. And you'll get the PowerPoint afterwards. You can have access to that.
Here we go.
So just a final quote. This is in the preamble of IDEA. It's also in the DD Act. It's in a number of disability laws, considered the disability policy precept, that disability is a natural part of the human experience that in no way diminishes the right of individuals to participate in or contribute to society. Okay, questions?
All right, so Penny, I think that we came in just a couple of minutes over your target time for us. So
you guys have done an excellent job. This presentation was awesome. Let's show them some love even right now. Christine, there are a few questions I'm sure that came up. I've seen them jump in the chat. I want to recommend very quickly that you guys take this on the road. You guys are, and we'd like to invite you to Partners in Policymaking to do it together.
Of course, of course.
Christine.
Yes, absolutely, Dr. Fetty. Thank you, the three of you so much. We have plenty of questions. The first question is, as providers, will Centers for Independent Living still have a role in the DD waiver, and will it change in any way?
So, Christine, some of these questions are going to be like presentations all by themselves. And we saw some of the questions that were asked in preview, and we thought, wow, that's a big one. I'm not sure we're really in a position to answer that one today. We do think that the Centers for Independent Living are incredibly valuable partners to us under the Developmental Disabilities Act, but they are not part of the DD Act.
Right. Okay. So then a lot of these questions are future thinking questions.
Right.
And so I'll start with this one. With so many issues to work on and so many things to address and advocate for, do you see it more effective to concentrate efforts in one area or charge at several areas at once? And what area do you see the most push at this given moment in time?
I saw that one in the chat, and I thought, what a great question. Parthy or Terry, I don't know if either of you wants to take a first stab at it.
One of the things that we're focusing on, we're concerned about is maintaining services and supports, especially home and community-based services, because Medicaid has, there's so many unknowns. And I guess I'll start with that. Right now there's so many unknowns about how federal cuts are actually going to trickle down to states. All states are going to manage them differently. All states have different resources and different legislatures. So it's still a little bit difficult to know how some of the challenges that are happening at the federal level are going to impact all states. But one thing we do know is that there's a significant cut in Medicaid dollars that will be coming into Virginia. We know that home and community-based services are optional services in Medicaid, where a number of other services are mandatory. So we're particularly concerned about cuts to home and community-based services, and how do we ensure that that those cuts don't happen here in Virginia. So that's something we're looking closely at. We're also concerned about what may happen with the Department of Education. Again, still a lot of unknowns. I know that our Department of Education hasn't experienced any cuts at this point. But what's going to happen, down the road, there's a lot we have to keep our eyes on. So home and community-based services, education, I think are two keys.
And I would say too, Terry, I think we can all acknowledge that we have a ton coming at us at once, and it's very hard to prioritize. And so it's like also building the muscle of flexibility and kind of figuring out how you can marshal your resources to address the immediate problem in front of you, because those problems you are unanticipated at times. I think a lot came to us that we did not think about, and we had to get our ducks in a row very quickly, and address that moment and find our networks to address that issue and move forward. So I think, again, that connection to community, we could not have done any of what we've had to do in the past year alone. We've really relied on our partners. So having that base is really important in addressing any of these issues, because, again, that collective voice is so much more important and is so much more recognized than just a sole voice. So I think it's kind of girding yourself and figuring out what is your foundation and who are your key partners and who are your thought partners in dealing what's the immediate threat in front of you, because there's multiple threats that are in front of us right now.
And as for the question of should we try to take them all on at once or dig deeply into one issue, that's really got to be your choice. You've got to figure out what your tolerance is for chaos, which is really what we're all living through right now. How much you can, there are a lot of people who like to chime in a little bit here, a little bit there and everything. And if that is your skill set, go for it. If you get overwhelmed by that approach, then pick something and dig in. It's really got to be some self-awareness of what your tolerance is for fighting what is really a lot of stuff.
Absolutely. That you bring up a good point. And so one of the questions, this was sort of a segue to this next question, is do you see the Americans with Disabilities Act hanging by a thread?
Let me start with that one. As soon as the composition of the Supreme Court changed 4 or 5 years ago, we became very concerned about the future of the Americans with Disabilities Act. We've been working with the legislature pretty steadily since then, the state legislature, to improve the protections of the state disabilities law in case something happens to the Americans with Disabilities Act. I believe our state law is now much, much stronger than it was. It was, the State Disability Act was passed in 1983 or 1984 and had some outdated concepts in it. It had I think a $500 limit for what a reasonable accommodation could cost. There were just some really outdated concepts in it. And the legislature never took the time to update it because the Americans with Disabilities Act passed. So we have been working with them to update it. As far as I know, there is nothing coming to the Supreme Court in this term that we're in right now that would jeopardize the Americans with Disabilities Act, but they also have not finished taking all of their cases yet.
Okay. Are there circumstances when someone has an undiagnosed developmental disability that is discovered after the age of 22? And what do you do in those circumstances?
My nephew had a car accident when he was, I think, 20 or something. And, comes from this side of my family that is all tough guy, pull ourselves up, we can muscle through it. And I said, hang on to all of those records, because there may come a time when you want to be treated as a person with a developmental disability. And if you have not saved those records, you're not going to be able to prove it.
Excellent. With DAR's vocational programming being funded by the Federal Department of Education, what advocacy is being done for continuity of service?
I'd say that one too is a little bit beyond the scope of the Developmental Disabilities Act. At the Disability Law Center of Virginia, many of our programs are funded by the Department of Education too. And for right now, it looks like those programs are all going to receive continued funding under the budget proposals coming out of Congress. But it's something we all need to keep our eye on. And maybe at some point we'd be able to hear from DARS about whether they've got any contingency plans.
And I'll just add that some of that advocacy is being done at the federal level when it involves the federal budget and federal cuts.
Yeah.
And being connected to national organizations is a good way to get that information. As I mentioned before, our Virginia board is a part of a national network of 56 DD councils, and we have a national association, the National Association of DD Councils. And they do advocacy at the federal level, and they advocate directly with Congress, and lots of national associations do that. If you're a part of the National Council for Independent Living, I think Nickel, or those other national associations, tap into the National ARC, tap into them and find out what they're doing at the federal level and how you can support that.
Right. There's a tremendous amount going on at the federal level.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like find your network within Virginia and see how they're connected to that federal level. Because I do think it is very scary. There is a lot of work going on right now.
That's a great recommendation. The next question, any suggestions for streamlining the waiver implementations?
I pass on that one.
That's again, I mean, it's beyond the scope of what we do as a DD network. We're very involved in a lot of the work groups. So I go back to, and you're probably sick of me saying this, but connecting to, there are lots of work groups. There's lots of opportunity to provide comment in Virginia, whether it be through DBHDS or through Medicaid work groups, or with your legislators on how you are experiencing waiver services and supports and what you think needs to be happening. So that's where you find your voice and advocate and get out there and be part of things. Because I think there's a really tight group of people that you always see doing this. It'd be great to have new voices with that group to keep communicating. There's this growing community that really wants to see change, and that's how change happens.
Absolutely.
If I may interrupt, it is now 1:54, and I want to ask a practical question as we move to our closing remarks. And that is to our executive directors. I wonder if you could briefly give us what your typical experience, your typical day is at the General Assembly as we get ready for the new session. Terry alluded in one of her slides that, you know, Virginia Board informs and educates. But I'm just wondering, what is it like for you? And because collectively, we kept hearing collective actions matter, how does that show up at the General Assembly throughout, you know, perhaps a 3 months experience?
I don't think there is such a thing as a typical day at the General Assembly, but I do want to encourage all of you to connect with your state legislators. They are really not scary people. I mean, I know a lot of us are worried that they're going to like challenge us and tell us that our opinions are wrong or something like that, and they just don't. They are really happy to hear from you. They are really interested in your stories. So you can contact them. You can send them email, and their legislative aides read that email. You can call them, but they have part-time secretaries answering the phones, and those people are not allowed to even comment on policy or even really think about policy. So your better bet is to either email or actually go down in person and try to meet with your representative's legislative assistant or directly with that representative. And I promise you, they will not hurt you. They are really very happy to talk to their constituents and to anybody in Virginia.
Thank you. Any other answers to that question?
If they hurt you, you can tell me.
I would, echo what Colleen is saying, and I would also say, we have some restrictions on us as far as doing direct advocacy with legislators, but we work very closely with our partners who do that, and so we help support people with disabilities and families to get to events, to be able to develop kind of action statements in order to share with legislators. And we work very closely with our partners in the disability community they're going to General Assembly every day. So again, it doesn't mean that you always have to show up and be the person carrying the message. Oftentimes it's better for the person with that lived experience to carry that message. And so you need to be able to provide the supports to them so that they can do that. And that oftentimes takes, a lot of prep work. And so that's some of the work that we can do as part of supporting the disability community, is to help get people together, to help carry messages, to help refine messages, and to have people's voices heard.
And we spend a lot of time at the General Assembly when the General Assembly is in session, and we focus our time, or how we present or speak with legislators focuses on educating them about the impact of bills and that are up, that they may be voting on. We don't tell them how to vote. We tell them that this is going to have a negative impact on people with disabilities, and this is why. Or this is going to have a positive impact on people with disabilities, and this is why. So we take it from an education perspective. So we do meet with legislators. We share with them who we are. We use our assessments a lot because we have a lot of recommendations in our assessments for actions by the General Assembly that's backed up with evidence in those assessments. We also work with, other organizations and support their legislative agenda based on how something's going to impact people with disabilities and families and why. So when we speak on a bill, we couch it with, this is going to have a positive impact or a negative impact, to take that education lens. It gets very gray, lobbying versus advocacy is a gray area, but we try to really stay within our lane as much as possible. And education makes a difference. Telling people the impact, how something's going to impact people, makes a difference.
Well, again, we want to thank the three of you. This is our first. I want you to know that our training alumni were so excited that the three of you could commit to this session today, and it was something that they had been asking for some time. I have learned so very much. I took copious notes It was really good to see and to hear what the three different areas do and then the similarities related to training and information. I love that term, collective action matters. I don't know who did your PowerPoint, but it was excellent. And I love the creativity of interspersing the quiz and the answers. I thought that was powerful. That's a great training model. So thank you for that. On behalf of Virginia Board for People with Disabilities, we want to invite you to our final 2025 session that will be held on December the 12th, Friday, December the 12th, from 12 to 2 p.m. We are going to be hosting the Virginia Department of Health, Children and Youth with Special Health Care Needs. That session again is December the 12th from 12 to 2. And then we will certainly be revealing our 2026 continuing education workshop schedule in January. The first one will take place in February of 2026. We want to let all of our participants know how much we value and appreciate your attendance today. We had over 200 that registered to attend this session, and our Facebook viewership for all of our continuing education workshops are anywhere between 300 and 500 viewers. So we know by Monday, Christine will be giving me the count. There were 400 people that viewed over the weekend because these sessions are so very valuable and so powerful. And so we thank all of our alumni always for coming. We're going to ask you to turn on your cameras so Christine can get a quick photo of you. But again, thank you. Happy holidays. We hope you enjoy your Thanksgiving season. And we'll look forward to seeing all of you on December 12th, 2025. Thank you, Executive Director Terry Morgan, Colleen Miller, and Parthy Denora. Thank you so very much for the outstanding presentation today. Show them some love, guys. Bye-bye.
You are very welcome. Very welcome.
Yeah, this is really fun. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.